So welcome everybody here in the classroom and around the world to DSLR Fast Start. My name is John Greengo. I am a photographer here in Seattle, Washington, and today we are going to be looking very closely at the Canon Rebel T2i, which is also known as the 550D. This is a really good camera, in my opinion. It is a very, very capable camera, and anyone who has it has got the world at their fingertips as far as I'm concerned. This class, we will be looking at virtually every button on the camera and going through all the menus and talking about virtually all the features of the camera. One of the things that I have found in really looking into this camera is that the designers of this camera have put a lot of features in there that not everyone is going to use. And so we're not able to go into every single feature of the camera, but I am going to be concentrating on the features that most people use most of the time. I expect today's class to last about 4 hours, might be a little bit longer when we kind of get involved in questions and answers, which I'm always having a fun time answering. And so that'll be a good part about the class. There is a download available if you are watching this, and this is a handout that I hand out to my actual class. And the first part of it is more designed for you to take notes on, just kind of a good place for you to make your own scribbles and scratches and diagrams. But then later on, at the end of the class, I have a whole section where I tell you how to set the camera up for different types of situations and kind of give you a good starting point, whether you're shooting sports or portraits. And that's kind of a handy reminder. And so we'll go through that towards the end of class, so something to look forward to. Well, we have a lot of information to go through today, so let's get this show on the road. We're going to have a bit of a switching. We're going to have some live feeds right on the camera, but we also have my keynote address, which is the PowerPoint, because I like to have a lot of visuals to help explain what we're going to be doing. And so overall, here's what our plan is for the day. I want to start with a little bit of product overview, just to let you know what you have bought into when you have bought a Canon T2i. We will be going through a few photography basics. This is a bit of a problem with this class if you have never taken photography or you don't know that much about photography and this is your first step into it. In my opinion, this is the best first step, getting to know your camera. But if you don't know photography, I'm going to encourage you to learn more about photography, and I have a little bit just so that we make sure that everyone is up to a certain level of understanding on some of the photography basics. Then we're going to basically be doing an unboxing of the camera. We're going to be looking at all the buttons going from top, back, front, sides of the camera, investigating what all these little buttons and controls are for. We'll take a little break for lunch. I'll try not to make it too long, and then we're going to come back and dive into the menu system. And we're basically just going to go step by step through the menu, explaining what all the different options are and whether you need them or not. Probably the most fun is going to be the camera operation. I like to think of this as the camera test. We are going to have our students here in the classroom, and I encourage you at home to follow along. And it's going to be a bit like working with a Rubik's Cube, if any of you have ever played with a Rubik's Cube. I'm going to be telling you to turn this on and turn that off, set this on your camera. So you're going to need to figure out how to turn the focus on, change your exposure, and make all the other changes that you really need to out in the field. And so you are going to, your finger's going to start learning where all those buttons are very, very quickly. And then to end the class off, we're going to talk a little bit about lenses and accessories. There's a lot of things out there, thousands and thousands, but I've picked a few, maybe about 2 dozen highlight items that I think that you should be aware of and might be interested in helping support your T2i or 550D in its operation. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, when you get the camera, you get this great instruction manual. And it's got about 260 pages, and I figure if you spend 2 minutes per page, you're going to spend about 8.5 hours on it. So how is it possible for us to explain the camera in just 4 hours? Well, I was thinking I could read just every other page, and that would take up most of the time, but that seems like an awfully bad idea. So what I've had to do is I've had to go through and I've had to weed through what's most important and what's not. As I mentioned before, the camera has a lot of capabilities that many people don't use. And a lot of those I have found are featured around the fact that this camera is designed for people to use who don't have computers. And I really haven't met anyone who falls into that category yet. But if you didn't have a computer, you can print from this camera. You can do all sorts of post-processing with this camera. And that's one of the major areas that I'm not going to be talking about today. And I encourage you to keep that instruction manual handy because there is more technical information that we're not going to have time to get into today. And so it's a good reference manual for some areas that you want to investigate more thoroughly. Secondly, This is not a photography class. If you're looking for a basic photography class, there are other classes out there, and we will mention those, that will teach you photography. And this class is really designed on how to use this one particular camera. There's a lot of general principles that will apply to other parts of photography, but if you find yourself struggling with some of the concepts and reasons that we do things, we're going to have to kind of move along, and you're going to want to maybe take a class in photography, get a book. We have several good classes here at creativeLIVE that you can download, and we'll mention some of those as we go along. So let's get started with the product overview. And I just want to let everyone know what they're getting into when they buy a Canon camera, and a T2i in particular. First off, Canon is one of the most respected names when it comes to digital cameras. It's a Japanese company. They've been specializing in optical products for quite some time. They are most notable probably for their cameras. They have consumer, professional, they have video cameras, and they also have a very large department with office products, printers, scanners, things like that. And they, as well as that, they make their own imaging chips that go in the cameras. There are other companies that have to source out for other companies to make chips, and Canon makes their own. A little bit on the history of Canon. We'll keep this extremely brief. They've started in 1933, and they came out with their first rangefinder camera, and it got off to a rather slow start. The war, definitely World War II, kind of slowed down the progress of what they were doing in the consumer field, but it definitely picked up in 1959 when they introduced their first SLR camera. And we'll be talking about what an SLR is here very soon. They brought out their first professional camera, the F1, in 1971. And then in 1987 is kind of a big year for Canon because they switched from their manual mount to their autofocus mount. And if you have a current Canon camera, you cannot use camera equipment back from the 1970s. It will not mount, it doesn't have the electronics and won't work. And so there was this big break date, and a lot of people with Canon were very upset because the whole thing switched over. But Canon wanted to design a system for the future, and it was, I think, a good move. It was a very tough move for them to make, but it was a good move overall. Then again in 2000, they came out with their first digital SLR. It was the D30, and it had 3 megapixels and sold for $3,000. Compare that with what you've bought here in the Rebel, which is typically going to sell with a lens for less than $1,000 and has 18 megapixels. So we have come a long ways since then. Next up, the system that you have bought into, the Canon SLR system, is a complete full range of cameras from entry level to top of the line professional cameras. And so as you grow as a photographer, and it is possible to outgrow a Rebel, as nice as it is, there are cameras that are much higher end that offer more features. And so if you're getting into photography, Canon is a great way to get into it because you have lots of room to grow. Some of the very best photographers in the world are using Canons, so the lenses that you start investing in, all the other accessories, are fully compatible, and you can just work your way up the ladder if you need be. One of the best parts about Canon is they have a fantastic range of lenses. They have over 50 lenses that'll do just about anything that you can imagine. Once you get into photography, you'll start coveting different lenses, and there's never enough lenses in the camera bag, or the camera bag sometimes gets too heavy when you do have it filled with all the lenses that you want. Finally, they also have a very good flash system. So if you need to add light to your situation, they have a great set of macro flashes and on-camera flashes, as well as being able to hook up to studio lights and so forth. So you have bought yourself into a very good system that is fully compatible with a lot of things out there. Now the T2i itself is about second from the bottom, I would say, in their entry level. They do have one camera that is below it in price and in features. As far as the history of the T2i in itself, the way Canon likes to work this camera is they came up with a really good design quite some time ago, and then they would tweak it about every 12 to 18 months, slightly improving it. And so it has gone through several generations, and we're on about the 6th generation of Rebels right now. And each one has gotten a little bit better. Either they've added more megapixels, they've added better user controls, or a variety of features to make it a better camera. And so it is a very highly refined camera at this point. Next up, we're gonna unbox our camera and take a look at what you get when you buy a standard kit. So what we have here today is we have the Rebel T2i and a basic kit lens of an 18-55 with image stabilization. And so we're going to go ahead and open this up, and just real briefly, some of the things that you get in here is the warranty cards, and you do not need to fill these out and send them in. They're just kind of most for your reference of what the serial numbers are. You get software so that you can look at raw images if you want. There are other programs that you can do this with, for instance, like Adobe's Lightroom, which is my personal favorite one. And then, of course, you have the instruction manual, which, as I said, is very important. But we're going to go for the good stuff. First and foremost, we got the camera right here. And I'm just going to kind of take out some of the most important things and create a mess on the desk. Set this aside. So, first and most importantly, we have the camera right here. And it does not come with the lens attached. We have the lens over here. Take off some of the wrapping. This is like one of the best parts about owning a camera. When you get the new box, it does, if you like cars, it kind of has a new car smell, and it's got that new camera smell. And so we'll worry about these accessories here in a moment. And so to take off the lens cap, there's a release right here you can press. Take off the rear lens cap. We're going to match up the white dot and the white dot on the camera, which I can show maybe to the overhead camera. Mount it like that, and we'll take the lens cap off. I'm not going to worry about the lens caps for here. You get a camera strap. You can attach that later. You'll get a battery charger, hopefully suitable to the country that you live in. You're going to get some AV cords so that you can plug it into traditional TVs and high-definition TVs, so you can have slideshows on those TVs. And then, of course, you are going to get a battery that we have secretly charged yesterday, so we have it full power for today. And so it mounts in here. You'll notice that these new batteries, and one of the aggravations that I have is that they keep changing the batteries from model to model. The latest generation has the greatest safety innovations, which is that you can't actually touch the contacts, and so that's why this little bump is here on the outside, and it can only go in the camera one direction. And that's not working that direction, so it's going to go in the correct way. All right, so got the lens cap off. We're going to turn the power on, and we need one other thing, and that's the memory card. And so I have a memory card handy. We're going to install the memory card, and we'll talk specifically about the memory card, what type and sizes and so forth later. And so let's just make sure this camera is working, and I'm going to go ahead and take a picture of our students. All right, pretty good picture to start, and I didn't even do anything. So who says maybe we don't need a class? Should we just all go home right now? Okay, so let me clean some of this stuff off the desk, because I like to have a clean desk. All right, so that is some of the basics that you're going to get in there. Probably the most important thing is to keep that instruction manual out and handy for the first couple months of use. Even I, who know these cameras pretty well, will go through the instruction manual page by page once in a while, usually only once or twice, but I want to try to pick up something that I didn't know about. It's often handy to go through the instruction manual at first, just to it's good to go through the instruction manual first, just to familiarize yourself with the camera, but then after you've had it for a few months, go through it again and dig for that next level down. So, with the care and handling of the camera, there is a lot of warnings, and some of those warnings are things like don't drop it, don't get it wet, don't get it too hot, don't take it apart, don't leave it by a giant magnet, don't store it with lots of corrosive chemicals, don't handle the power plug with wet hands, don't fire the flash at someone driving a car, don't use around flammable gas, and don't swallow the battery.
Wow, I can't believe you just
and these are all real warnings in there. In general, you don't want to be stupid with the camera. It's obviously a somewhat fragile electronic device, but the question that people most have is, what is this? This camera is not waterproof, do not get it wet. What does this really mean? Well, the camera is made of plastic, and if plastic gets water on it, that's not a major problem. The problem is that in between the buttons and dials, if water gets in there, it could potentially get to the electronics, and it could cause a problem. So if I was to very, very carefully place a very large drop of water, I could potentially disable this camera. If this was my camera that I spent my own hard-earned money on, and it was raining and I really wanted to get a shot, I would not have a problem going out in the rain and taking a picture. I wouldn't leave it out in the rain. I'm not going to leave it out on the deck all night in the rain. I'm not going to stay out in the rain for 3 hours shooting it. If it is raining, I'm going to probably try to keep it under an umbrella, a cover, a raincoat, and then take it out when I take pictures. There are also rain covers if you are going to be exposed in the rain frequently that you can put over it. So they can be used, I think, in a light rain without a problem, or with snow. It's just don't get excessive with it because the camera may shut down. And if it does shut down due to being wet, what I would recommend is airing the camera out. What you would do if you got it wet is you would take the lens off, you would take the battery out, leave the battery door open, open the memory card, and let air circulate around it. Don't take a hairdryer and try to blow it dry. Just let it circulate dry. Many times when that happens, the camera will come back to life and it will be fine just because it dried out. In some cases, it may need to go to the factory to get fixed. The other little warning is Canon is not liable for damage if used with non-Canon accessories. Well, I have a non-Canon accessory already in this camera, and this is my memory card. Canon doesn't make memory cards. They do test them and make sure, and there's generally not going to be a problem with any of the memory cards, but lenses, flashes, wireless remotes, batteries, memory cards are all things that you are going to be connecting up to your camera. And Canon does not want to be held liable in case something damages your camera. And it is possible if you had something, I don't know what, I have rarely ever seen it. It's possible that something could damage your camera. And so in general, it's good to stick with Canon accessories and products, but sometimes there's other products that work very well. There are other brands of lenses, Tamron, Tokina, Sigma, Zeiss, that make lenses that work perfectly well with the camera, and you will get great images from. But occasionally the camera can't communicate with the lens in some of the features that you'll see that we get into in the menu section, and it can't perform certain functions simply because it doesn't have that communication that it expects with the Canon lens. So I don't have too much of a problem hooking up non-Canon accessories when it comes to lenses. I do like Canon flashes on Canons. I think flash is a very complicated system, so with a TTL system, I would stick with the Canon flash. With the batteries, the Canon batteries have all the right chips in them so that they communicate properly. They're a little bit extra. I tend to side on the safe, the caution side and stick with the Canon batteries. With memory cards, anything that fits in there will work fine in general. So preparing the camera for taking pictures, and this is going to be the brief section. So to start with, you'll want to charge the battery for a couple of hours. We've already attached the lens, so we're good for that. We've installed the battery, and we have installed the memory card, and we've got the camera turned on, and I encourage the students here in the class to make sure your camera is turned on, lens caps off, and this may be the last time you ever hear me say this, but turn your dial to the green auto mode and go ahead and just take a picture. And it's not super bright in here, so most of the people's flashes are popping up because that's what happens in the green automatic mode. And so I just want to make sure that everyone's camera is working and you're able to follow along as we move on to this.